We live in a mysterious world. We don't really know anything about any of the objects that surround us. This is not because we are stupid, but because objects are unknowable. This is true in a number of ways. First of all, our perception is always partial. In order to see something, we have to see it from a certain position, so we never perceive the whole object. Paolo Uccello was an Italian Renaissance artist who was working when the system of linear perspective was first developed. This drawing of a chalice shows him experimenting, trying to find out how much of an object he can actually show. Some parts of the chalice are opaque, and other parts are transparent. The cup itself is opaque, but if you look below where the stem joins, it is transparent. He is imagining a form of drawing that would enable a fuller perception than that available to ordinary sight. Of course, when we look at his drawing, we also see the price of this additional knowledge, the loss of all the surface texture of the chalice. So even in a work like this that attempts to overcome the limits of perception, our knowledge remains partial. In addition, we never see quite the same thing as anyone else. I'm sure you've been told that if you were to place two artists next to one another and ask them to draw the same scene, they'd come up with quite different drawings. Well, it's true, and there are a few occasions where we can see this happening in practice. For a time in the late 1860s, Monet and Renoir were good friends and would often go out painting together. On this occasion, they were painting on the banks of the Seine at Renoir, a popular destination for Sunday day trippers. You can clearly see that they were in the same place. We can see the same floating cafe on the right, the same island and jetties, and the river beyond. But the two paintings feel quite different. Renoir's painting is full of bustle. I don't know how many people are on the little island, but I can imagine the sounds of conversation and laughter, and I imagine some flirting is going on. On one of the jetties, an elaborately dressed fashionable woman passes a nearly naked young boy, while on the island a dog has flopped asleep in the sun. There are lots of incidents. In Monet's painting, by contrast, you can count all the people. There is distance between them, even if only slight. I imagine a quieter atmosphere. Both painters have used loose strokes of alternating light and dark to give the rippled reflection on the surface of the river. But in Monet, the darks are blacker and the lights brighter than they are in Renoir, and this makes the water in Monet's painting appear colder and glassier than Renoir's water. So there are all kinds of significant differences that come through when two people look at the same object. Renoir and Monet were both highly skilled painters who knew what they were looking at, but they knew different things. And this leads us to ask, what would count as an adequate knowledge of an object? The artist Via Selmins spent several years on a set of works where she would pick up a rock, almost at random, and then cast it either in resin or bronze, and painstakingly paint the cast so that when you look at them, you cannot tell which is the real object and which the imitation. She must have spent so long studying each square millimetre of the surface so that she could imitate so precisely. Surely, you would think, she must have spent so long looking at the rock that she came to know it very well indeed. She must have done, and yet she only ever came to know the surface of the rock. Her knowledge of the interior was not necessarily any deeper at the end of the process than it was at the beginning. In fact, there's a huge amount about the rock about which she knows nothing, which makes you wonder what you would have to do to acquire an adequate knowledge of something as ordinary as a rock. How many years would you need? It also means that despite all the hours of study Selmins put in, the rock remains a mystery. If anything, she has deepened the mystery of the rock's existence. And this is the next consequence of an object's unknowability. Even the simplest, dumbest object remains a mystery. There will always be aspects that recede beyond our ability to perceive. When I look at her cast and painted rocks and realise that I cannot tell them apart from the real thing, it also makes me aware that when I look at a pile of stones, I don't actually know, just by looking, whether they are real or not. At which point a kind of vertigo takes hold, and I find I generally base my sense of the reality of the world on the flimsiest of foundations. It's not just that objects are practically unknowable, that even if you study one particular object for years, it will still retain the capacity to surprise you, but that objects are unknowable by definition. The philosopher Kant used two terms to explain this condition: phenomenon and noumenon. The phenomenon is what we perceive. We only know anything of objects insofar as we can perceive them. We can see them, touch them, smell, taste, hear them, and so on, but our knowledge will always be limited by our senses. By contrast, the noumenon, what Kant calls the thing in itself, may have properties that we cannot perceive. So, for instance, we know that our eyes can only detect a section of the spectrum of light. Some insects, for instance, can see ultraviolet light that is invisible to us. Dogs and other animals can hear sounds that are inaudible to us. But it could go beyond that. Kant claims that as we are creatures of space and time, we can only know objects insofar as they are perceptible in space and time. For all we know, the universe may exist in many more dimensions, but we will never know those aspects of the universe because they are beyond our space-time limits. So the thing in itself is unknowable. Charles Avery has played around with these ideas in a series of works called The Island. It's a kind of fictional autobiography. He imagined himself, the artist, as a kind of explorer. The artist sets sail for an island, which he has heard of, but which no one has ever visited. When he finally lands, he discovers that not only have people visited before, but there's actually a thriving resident population. And this is the lot of the artist: the desire to boldly go where no one has gone before, followed by the realisation that many people, much more talented than oneself, have got there ahead of you. On the island, the most prestigious activity is hunting a legendary beast known as the noumenon. None have ever been caught. Very few people have even seen one. If you do catch sight of one, it will be at some distance and will be walking away from you. No one has ever seen a noumenon's head. That is, no one has ever looked at things as they really are, in the face. Again, this is the artist's dream: to catch a truth that no one has seen before, and to bring it back and display it. This is a genuine motivation, but almost impossible to fulfill. If we are lucky, we may catch a glimpse of the truth every now and then, but it will be out of reach, and we will have to make do with approximations. The dumb, unthinking objects that we live amongst invariably outrun us. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please like and subscribe, and visit my channel Think of a Picture, where you'll find lots more short, thought-provoking videos. Thank you.